podcast episode, and this one is going to be mostly visual as well as audio. So if you guys are on Spotify, feel free to go to the description and go to watch it on YouTube. So basically, me and Tete are going to be exploring one of the cities in the game Genshin Impact, which is Mondstadt. This is the first city you get to go to, and we're going to be discussing world building tips and how you can apply the kind of world building you see in Genshin Impact to your own stories.
Exactly. Genshin Impact is one of those rare, wonderful examples of having good world building. And by good world building, it doesn't necessarily have to be complicated or be so, how do I say, be so multi-layered that it intimidates your audience. You want to have a world that's both accessible, interesting, and interactive for your audience. And Genshin Impact is a really great example of that. Plus, it's a very comforting, soothing game as well. And I think that's something you want to build your readers into.
Right. So, for example, this is the waitress of Good Hunter, and basically you can buy food to go. So I really like how in Genshin Impact you get so many little details, such as, the kind of food that each types of people eat in different cities and cultures. So this is what Mondstadt people eat, for example. So you have fried eggs, the mushroom skewer, the fisherman's toast, which looks very yummy. I mean, a lot of people would like to know how to make it in real life, I think.
I love the fisherman's toast. It looks very elegant. It looks like it has some radishes on it, like an avocado toast thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to buy some recipes. So yeah, you can buy recipes and actually learn how to make more stuff, based on this.
Oh, mint jelly. Yum.
Know. So it's really fun.
Tea bread pancake.
Yeah, crab roll. I don't think I bought that before. But yes, I'm just demonstrating the kinds of stuff that you can buy.
Ham. Yum.
Mm-hmm. And look at how nicely rendered everything is. All these tiny details.
I love it when you see something like this, you see all those tiny little details like dishes, pots, pans. Like, it's just so nice to see this and not be, intimidated, by, I don't know, too many HDR filters that make, like, so many video games have this dark filter that's very irritating.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to demonstrate how you can cook something. So I just learned how to make mint jelly from buying the recipes. So let's try to make one.
Ooh, I love it. It's very different than what I thought it would look like.
So here's one of them.
Ooh.
And you can make pancakes.
I like that. Pancakes. I haven't had that in a while.
Awesome.
Gotta go to IHOP.
So yeah, you can make a lot of stuff here. It's really fun.
Oh my God. I love it.
My name in humble supplication.
And yeah,
I love it. Oh, there's a cafe.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the windmills. But yes, when we're world building, how do you think we can balance out detail with, not overwhelming our audience? Because I think that is something that a lot of us struggle with.
Gosh, where to begin with that? Because that's something I struggle with too. I mean, I guess just to pose the question out there, if any of you guys want to comment who follow us on Tapas, I'm just rather curious. Well, you know what? I will ask you. How do you feel like the world building in Scale, Blood, and Bone? Do you feel like it's pretty solid, or do you feel like it's a little vague?
I think it is solid so far, especially in the prologue. I think you did a lot of world building in the prologue.
Yeah, the prologue's where I really established a lot, especially with the, how do I say, the lore or the background of the old god and, Raquel and her people, and then the formation of the kingdom and things like that. And I did try to put in a lot of elements that, how do I say, that they weren't your usual, they weren't of your usual thing that you see in a lot of fantasy.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And, for Gerda and the Frost Lord, did you ever think of doing something that was more detailed, or did you not get the opportunity to do that?
I did not. And I had so many ideas. I even wanted to make a little guide for the world. because for example, in Gerda and the Frost Lord, we have the other world. So the other world's basically like, if you will, a fairy tale world. You have different people. You've got the Olenki, who are a deer people, the Sovi, who are like owl people, mostly barn owls, mystical looking owls, and they're more of a scholarly people, while the Olenki, they're more of craftsmen and minstrels, but some of them do sorcery, but it's mostly like finding things. So that's their specialty of magic. I then had, people who were based on like different Nordic creatures, like Fosgrims and things like that, water nymphs, things, people of that nature. I even had people who were, they could shapeshift into giant wolves, but they were human. But when you saw them as a human, you could see some wolfish qualities like shaggy eyebrows or sharp teeth or yellow eyes, which is what one of the characters, Vogler, is.
Mm-hmm. And did you struggle with putting this out into your series because you felt overwhelmed by the amount of detail?
I felt overwhelmed by the amount of detail, and I didn't know how to go about writing the story because I started off on a very shaky foot, and it was very exhausting writing the descriptions and details, and I was intimidated how to write it. And because I was intimidated how to write it, I never got far past the first chapter and a few little role plays now and then.
Right. So do you think maybe the first thing you should do when you're establishing a story with a very detailed world is kind of start with the story first rather than look at the details?
I think it's very important, to start with the story first, then look at the world, because it's pretty much what I did with Scale, Blood, and Bone. I just went ahead with it. I didn't think about, the world. I just went with it. And, the world was kind of building itself as I wrote it. Believe it or not, things like, the nature of the old god changed, because before it was sort of a, kind of a standard, cruel, demanding god. But then, as I began writing it, the god himself changed, and he became kind of a benevolent figure, but he was kind of trapped by his own limitations of laws of order and such. And, this is something he imparts to Rukel, that he doesn't want any of these bad things to happen, but, there's a price to pay for her accomplishment, for the, what she desires for her people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very different than the original concept. And then from there on, things just began to build more and more, and now we've got other things like shadow people coming into play.
Right. So sometimes it's better to start with the story rather than just focus on the tiny details, which you can add in, for flavor later on.
Exactly. I think the details, and I think another way to include details is to do it with interaction. Like, say somebody's going to have a meal, talk about the food they're eating. Like, for a second, like this person had a meal of poached, golden salmon from the glistening streams of the river Taichi or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it was served with parsley harvested in the rippling emerald fields a few miles away. And then already people have an idea of what that world looks like. Like, oh, there's streams and fields.
Right, and I think this is what we see in Genshin Impact too. The food that each city has reflects the environment. So, for example, when we were talking about the Fisherman's toast, there's a huge lake, which you can see here actually.
I see. Wow, it's a big lake.
Yeah, this whole place, if you look at the map, is surrounded by this giant lake.
Whoa, it's like an island.
Exactly, so you can understand where they got the Fisherman's toast from.
I love that. I love that detail of world building. It's so nice. And also, it would be so fascinating to live in a place like that, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. And here's the cathedral.
Ooh. It's a beautiful cathedral, by the way.
Mm-hmm. The lighting is really beautiful in here.
It is.
Oh, it looks different at night. It's actually less bright, but still beautiful.
Still beautiful nonetheless. It really is.
Mm-hmm. So, when you focus on locations, for example, do you think maybe locations they should be described when the characters go there, rather than just, brainstorming about locations in and of themselves, right?
I think sometimes it's good to at least give some thought beforehand, before you send your characters to a location, to make sure that it makes sense, it fits their goals, and it fits what you're doing. But for the most part, I think once you throw your characters, feet on the ground, then you can kind of imagine how that is going to appear before them. It's a bit like, I did a little bit of this with the island for Malka, but I also did this with the great expansive desert and mountainous grotto that, I guess, spoiler alert, people are going to see it anyway next week, when Jules finally meets Venomian.
You know what? Speaking of a mountainous grotto, I should show you one in our next episode that we're going to record. Because these episodes are going to be pretty short, because we're basically just covering one location in Genshin Impact while we talk about stuff that interests us. Oh, look, there's actually this one thing there that I did not notice. I think we're going to do it today. But do you see that little red dot in the tower?
Oh my gosh, I do. What is that? Oh, is that like a saving point?
Yes, it is. I didn't realize there was one there. So let's try to see if we can go there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So these kind of Easter egg kind of things, do you think, okay, it's different because yours is a book rather than a game, right? But do you think we will have something similar in Scale, Blood, and Bone, like random Easter eggs that are nod to something else?
Yeah, I think we will have Easter eggs. So, like Easter eggs, do you mean like Easter eggs in reference to your series or other like fantasy franchises, or?
I guess in general, it could be anything.
I've always wondered. I know what an Easter egg is in video games, but what is generally defined as an Easter egg for many people? Because I've always been curious. Because I know Marvel movies and video games, but I don't know how that would translate necessarily into literature.
That's true. Maybe just a nod. Yeah, this is a teleport waypoint. Let's activate it. Ooh, awesome.
Teleport, man.
Yeah, so now we can take a look at the city from above. Oh, here. I'll go here so it's easier to see. But yeah.
Like, I mean, I know... Am I allowed to give more spoilers on this episode?
I think you are.
Okay. I have an episode. So the old lady that everybody met in this chapter that just dropped this weekend. So the old lady is actually Venomian's wife, and in your canon, that's Doris.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, it is.
And I just thought I would drop two. I think I told you on Tapas. Oh, there's Paimon.
Mm-hmm.
I love her. I believe that she's going to meet Malka, and I think she's going to help Malka try to help Joel, because I think Doris doesn't want to see Malka end up kind of lonely and bitter and miserable like herself because of Venomian's stupidity.
That's true. Yeah, Venomian is very, focused on one point to the detriment of every other point in his life.
Exactly, just like Joel. Joel is right now.
Mm-hmm, exactly. But yes, I think, what do you think, we have learned from Mondstadt? Like, what do you feel from the city, and how do you think we can apply that to world building in general?
I think we've learned several things. The first one, you don't always have to hit your audience over the head with info dumping. You can reveal a lot when you journey. Just the geographical location itself can tell you what kind of world you're entering in. Right now we're in a water-based environment, but we're also surrounded by various high points, cliffs, valleys, and fields. So, we have something of, not necessarily oceanic, but we do have a large body of water. So we have like river, lake, if you will, water biology going on. And, we have this setting that is sort of semi-fisherman. We also see the location. We see the windmills. So people take advantage of wind because of where they're located. It's sort of like they're in a low point of a valley, at least in the city, which is where a lot of cities are built because of things like, wind to push mills to grind wheat and other things. But also for ease of location, sturdier location, foundation for the earth, as well as being a focal point where all points can meet, making it the ideal metropolis. Metropolis, yes.
You can see that there are a lot of these mountains and ridges around them.
Exactly. So this is the low point. This is the valley. So this is where a lot of people build their towns and cities. In fact, I live in an area similar to this, not with a big lake or anything, but I live in a place that is a valley adjacent to a mountain and, ridge side as well.
Mm-hmm. And do you think we'll learn more about the city where Jules rules? Where he grew up anyways, like where his mother rules, more accurately?
I think we will. We didn't get to explore much of the city at all because Jules has kind of isolated himself in the palace, and he's only ventured a little bit into the university, and that's it.
That's true, and it fits his personality, but it would be nice, I think, to see more of Malka interacting with people and maybe just, doing regular stuff, such as sitting at the cafe or going to these places, reading books. There's a lot of books in Genshin Impact. Look at this, for example, Vera's Melancholy.
Ooh, it's a book.
Yeah, you can gather books and you can, read them in your archive. Kind of like in Skyrim, you just see books and then you gather all of them and you can read them in your spare time when you open your inventory.
I love that. I remember people talking about that in Skyrim and that these were actually books you could read.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, by the way, this is really interesting. There's a seal on this door, but we don't know who created it and you can't go past it.
Oh my gosh. So there's no way to find out how to disable it or something.
Yeah, I think we'll probably find out later on, but yeah, this is locked.
This is very fascinating. I like this. I like this detail.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering...
Yes?
You've inspired me. I'm wondering if Malka, maybe she finds a way to return to the city, but maybe she has to go incognito because she's trying to find a cure for Joel.
That's true. Maybe she could do that.
And that would give us an opportunity to see more of the city itself. But I'm also thinking Manashe could probably tell us a lot about the city since he's a shadow. And I mean, he was actually there before the beginning of the whole city because shadows are very old.
That's true. So how about the city that she's in, the City of Illusions? Are we going to also learn more about it? Or do you think it's not really necessary because it's based on the original one?
I think we can learn more about it because it's actually very different than the city she's in, that she came from.
Right. So I guess we could talk more about what it looks like and how it differs in terms of mood and I guess location too, right?
True. And how it feels to Malka anyway, it feels very staged because it doesn't feel like a bustling metropolis like the city she grew up in. Not only does the city on the island look different, the clothes are a little different because it's more suited to a more warmer climate. And of course, the materials and design are more, I guess they're more of a Southern Sea type of basic sort of thing. But also, too, everything feels a little staged and manufactured because you know what I mean? Everything is just too perfect and too pleasant. She knows that Joel commanded all these shadow people to do that for her. And she's really trying to urge many of these shadow people to, kind of question this existence they've been kind of bound to by Joel and question it and wanting to develop their own person rather than just following a command. Just because many of them really desired, to have a human form. But I mean, also, I think too, there's going to be maybe a faction, logically speaking, there has to be a faction of some shadows who are very dissatisfied with what Joel did to them. And I think they're going to be angry and maybe want to rebel somehow.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense.
That's true, and I think Malka's maybe she's going to encourage that a little bit, like not through violence or anything, but like to forge their own destiny and like get a name for themselves and um, start to do things. How do I say, to become their own person.
That makes a lot of sense. I think those are some really great ideas, and I can't wait to think more about the city. And maybe you can also start thinking about the city in terms of like a game, like how you can explore it, from a third or first person perspective, and think about it like in terms of interactivity as well. That could really bring it to life.
I really could. I mean, I'm already trying to think of it. And so are we, when we say the city, are we talking about the illusion city or are we talking about Malka City?
Maybe both. Like, we don't have to overwhelm people with details, but it could be interesting to just have more details and maybe more stories. For example, like Menashi and her in like exploring the city and talking more about it as they learn more about each other.
I think so. I mean, at this point, I'm really loving Menashe's character. I almost kind of want him to exist through the whole series.
Do you
Now.
think we can change that? We don't have to kill him off, right?
No, I don't think so. I mean, that just seems a little too grimdark. Like, I mean, after all the crap of Game of Thrones and Berserk, do we need more death,
That's true. Yeah, so
Tired of killing off people.
in the next episode, we're going to explore Storm Terror's place. So that's where the dragon lives, and it was where the first boss battle of this game was. So we'll talk about that, and maybe you'll have more inspiration for, Jules and Benjamin.
I think so, because it's going to be very terrifying, the end result with Genshin.
Yes, definitely. So see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for joining.
Well-being of my